This is AndyTube, and this is a Singer Model 457 Stylist sewing machine. In this video, I'm going to show you how to change out the top gear of the vertical shaft. This machine, as well as a handful of others, is internationally known for having a very weak plastic top gear on that vertical shaft. Personally, I think the type of plastic that was used was susceptible to becoming defective when oil or grease was constantly on it. I think the hydrocarbons reacted with it and made it discolored and very brittle. So over the years, it got a very bad reputation as being a bad machine. I think the machine itself is just fine, personally. And this video, what I want to do is show you for about 10 bucks, you can change that top gear and you can have a real competent home sewing machine. And the Stylist line was really for people who like to make their own clothes and alter their clothing and do household sewing like curtains and draperies and seat covers and tablecloths, things like that. Now, there's a handful of machines that use this same gear. And before we get started, I'm just going to give you a quick slideshow of those other models. And if you want to pause on each slide and write down the model number or take a look at it, you know, I just want to make you aware of those other models. So take a look at this slideshow, and then I'll be back. Now, if you have one of those models, it's going to have the same mechanical parts in the machine as this. You saw many of them had a different face cover here, cover plate, and they might have had a dial, you know, instead of a stitch length lever like that. But they all have this vertical shaft that runs inside here. And the plastic gear on top mates with a plastic gear on the main arm shaft. And I've never had one of the gears on the main arm shaft go bad, even though it's been covered with grease. But the gear that sits on the top of that shaft is the one that we're going to replace. This is the replacement gear. They come in black and white. Plastic. I tend to prefer the white ones, and I'm not sure why, but you'll see both black colored plastic and white. But the main thing is the part number. The Singer part number is how you can search and find it, and it's part number 155819. 155819. Now, Terry Fielding at TNT Repair sells that gear, I'm sure, and I'll put a link in the description below this video to his Stylist page, because he has free documents for the different Stylist models, and he has some guides that he wrote himself about how to do this and how to do other things on the machines. And if you have a dial and a different cover plate and you can't figure out how to get it off, it may be worth your time you know, to go buy a guide for 10 bucks than to spend all day trying to figure out and maybe breaking something. And if you do buy anything on his website before August 1st, 2019, when you check out, if you will use a code, coupon code ANDY-H-YT, he'll give you 20% off everything you buy. Okay, so we've got that gear in mind. Now, if your machine is in a case like this, you know, you're going to have to take it out of the case to do this work. If it's mounted in a cabinet on hinges where it hangs down and then can be tilted up, you may be able to do the work while it's still in the cabinet. You'll have to decide that. But the first thing that we want to do, let's see if we can get a little more light here maybe. If you have a needle in it, you want to take the needle out. Take the needle out right away. And we're going to take off the cover plate. On this model is just a little thumb screw right here. So we'll loosen that, take it off, and then we can take off the cover plate. Don't lose your parts, okay? Matter of fact, I'm going to get mine over here and put them in my mag bowl. The other thing is the top arm cover up here. It has two screws like this that hold that cover on, and I've already taken them out, but there's one up here in the front and there's one back here just ahead of the hand wheel. And when you take those two screws out, you can just lift the arm cover straight up and off. Okay? Now, let's come around here and we'll just keep working our way down the machine. We have to get this face cover or face plate off. And there's a few screws you have to take off to do that. Okay? There's two screws here on the bottom. You see them in these corners. There's one screw up here directly on top of the on-off switch for the bobbin winder. So that's three. There's a screw that holds the bobbin winder fill stop right here, screw right in the middle. And there's one more screw over on this end. And this one doesn't screw into the aluminum body like all the others do. It goes through the body, and there's a kind of a screw clip. It's kind of like a washer that acts as a nut. And you'll see it when you go back here, and I'll show it to you when I take it off. But that's the only one that's a little tricky, because the light fixture's there, and what you want to do is put your finger on that washer and stuff as you take the screw out, so that you can kind of press it against the machine and pull it up and lift it out. And to do that, I push the light fixture down, and then I take an extra screwdriver and stick it up here in the top like that. Let's see if I can lift that up. See how I've got that just stuck in there? So that way the light fixture, which is on a spring, stays lowered, so now I can get my finger in there on this little clip I'm talking about. So I'm going to take that one off first. See if I get my finger. You can feel the screw back there and then the clip. So I just hang on to the little clip so that it won't turn, and then let's see if I got the right screwdriver here. Come on, you. There we go. Because the clip just wants to spin with the screw. Okay, I got that loose now. Let me show you that screw. It's longer than some of the others, and it's threaded and everything. But let's see if I can get the clip out of there. A lot of times it'll fall down and I get my little magnet stick to pull it out, or sometimes it'll fall through the light fixture. Let's see if I can manipulate it here a little bit. Yeah, I'm not having much luck, am I? Nope. Let me grab my magnet stick. This was one of my best $1 investments from the dollar store. It's a little telescoping kind of a clip-on pen that's got a decent magnet on the end. It's great for when you drop stuff like this in there. I'm going to try and I'm going to take this out and exercise that light a little bit to see if it'll fall out. No. Okay. Let's see if I can find it down in there. Where did you go, you little rascal? That's why I always do this one first. It's kind of a pain. I really thought I had a good grip on it too. I can kind of hear it rattling around in there. I think it just slipped down. There it is, right there. Okay, you little rascal. That's it. Now, let's see if we can easily remove these other ones then. I'm going to take off the long one that goes through the bobbin winder stop. Here, I'll show you that. It just goes right through the center of that. And this one and the rest of them, they're threaded and screw right into the body. Now these three are shorter length. 1, 2, one more. Yep. Okay. So there's those three. Now the faceplate is ready to come off. I usually move this away from 0 a little bit, the width. You can leave this in the center, but this is a little springy, and you'll have to kind of push down on that a little bit to get it through the hole. The on-off is fine. If you have this model, move your lever up to the fine area, because there's a little bit wider place there in the slot, so you can pull the faceplate off of this. So you just start bringing it off. This, I'm going to push down now, and how to do this without blocking the, push this down a little so that it'll go through. There we go. And then there. Now I've got the faceplate off. So you see what's behind here, your stitch width, right? Left, center, right needle. The bobbin winder on-off button, which really just is a lever that moves the tire over. And the stitch width lever. Okay? Now, there's a little access port here. Some of the other models, this is very open and you can work right through this area. On this and a couple other models, you have to take this little cover plate off of an access port so that you can get your screwdriver in there on the set screw of the gear. That's what this little port here is to work on the cam stack and allow you to get access to that gear. And it's just a metal cover plate with two kind of fat screws like that. Take that off. And okay, there. The other screw, and this is what that little cover plate looks like. See, it's curved to fit the curve of the body. Okay, so let's get down here a little bit. So down inside, over that way, is the top of that vertical shaft with that gear screwed onto it with a set screw. I'll show you from the top angle here. You can't really see it very well, but you can see the gear that it mates with. So this plastic gear, which is on the main horizontal arm that goes all the way from the needle end through to the hand wheel, that arm shaft, that's the gear. So when the motor belt is turning the hand wheel, that gear rotates and it mates up down below with the gear from the top of the vertical shaft. That shaft goes down the machine and has a metal pulley on the bottom of it. And that's what powers the timing belt over to the pulley that's on the hook shaft to turn the hook. And here's what you can do when you're wondering if you have a problem with that gear, or if you're looking at this machine to buy. Because the first one of these 457s I ever bought, the guy wanted 25 bucks. It seemed okay to me. And he says, yeah, it works. You know, you turn it on, the needle goes up and down, the feed dog move, everything is cool. I said, okay. But when I came over and looked at it, it's true. When I let's see if I can get this in the frame here. When I turned the hand wheel towards me, see, I would look and I could see the needle bar going up and down. Hey, great. Right? I could see the feed dog. Let me get in here a little bit. I could see the feed dog. I put it down in the longest stitch, number 6, and I could see the feed dog, you know, coming up to pull the fabric and going back down. So it looked great. When I opened it up, you know, here's the bobbin case, and around that is the hook. And when I turn this, I see the hook's not rotating. Oh, what the heck? And he goes, oh, is that supposed to turn? I go, yeah. The hook has to grab the needle thread, and that's how it wraps it around the bobbin thread and makes a stitch. He goes, oh. So I said, well, let's look down below, because maybe the timing belt broke. The timing belt that would be between the two pulleys. And he didn't know anything about it, really. He bought it at a garage sale or something. So I went, at this point, I'm going to show you, lift out the bobbin. She'll have to do this later anyway. Take out the bobbin. Now on some machines, you raise the presser foot. You already have the needle off. Some machines, when you pull this slide plate completely open, there's a lever that pops up this post over here to take the tension off of the needle plate. This model doesn't have that. Okay, so when you have it open like this and the presser bar up, usually you want your take up lever, turn the hand wheel towards you and take take-up lever down towards the low point here. See? And that kind of keeps the feed dog low. And then you just go in and just take your thumb and finger and lift the right side of the plate and pull it off. So this is there's a spring in there that this pin holds the plate. This is the little depressed area that pin fits in. So that's all you have to do is just lift the right side and kind of pull it out from under that pin. Okay? Now later we're going to have to take out the bobbin case, but we'll do that later. But now we want to see, why isn't that hook turning, right? Back to my story. I really figured it was just going to be an old broken timing belt, right? Or maybe it slipped off the pulley or whatever. But let me lay this machine on its back and we'll take the bottom of the case off and we'll take a look. Okay, most of this style of Singer case, this plastic, is held on by a couple of long screws that go into the hole where the hinge would go if you were hanging the machine in a cabinet. So one hole is here, and the other's over here. So I've already removed those screws. Okay. Now you can find some different kinds of nuts and washers up here sometimes. In this case I have a flat nut that is put on the screw here that holds this side of the case. And there's either going to be a fatter thumb nut you can just turn with your hand, or if you have one of these flat nuts, there should be a slot cut in it for your screwdriver, and then you just unscrew it like that. Okay, and I see in this case the whole screw's coming out. Usually the nut will come off of the screw, but in this case the whole screw came out, which is no big deal. We can put that back in. It's got a little hole for it, little slot. Now we can carefully take this off and lift up the base of the machine a little and pull it off the bottom. Hey, look at that. The oil pan came right with it. First let me show you the case here. Okay, I'll try this view for a while here. So here was the case that I took off, right? And then this is the oil pan, drip pan. And sometimes this is gone. It should always be there, especially if you're mounted in a cabinet. But you might find one of those flat nuts here too. In this case, they didn't have one. So when I pulled off the plastic base of the carry case, this just slipped off too, which is fine, because we have to take it off anyway. Okay, and now you can see the bottom of that shaft with the metal pulley, and you see the cog belt that goes over here to the pulley that's on the bottom of the hook shaft. Okay, so normally when the belts turn in the hand wheel and those two gears at the top are meshing, this is going to turn also, and that's what rotates the hook. So when I opened up the one I was interested in buying, this was here. This was all here and it looked fine. I said, well, why isn't the hook moving? And I turned the hand wheel, right? And the needle was going up and down, and you can see the feed bar moving. Everything was moving but this. When I turned it by hand, this moved freely, and the hook would rotate like it's supposed to. So that's what I understood. Uh-oh, something's wrong with the gear at the top of this. And when I set the machine back up and looked closely with the flashlight, the gear was gone. And down inside the machine I later found pieces. So I told the guy never mind, that would be a hassle, and he was like, well, I'll give it to you for 20. I said no. I'll give it to you for 10. I said no. He said, well, give me $5. That's what I bought it for. I said, okay, I'll give you $5 because it's got a tension unit and a motor and everything else. But so I bought it for $5, and then I learned about the gear. I spent $10 on the gear, so I did put a new motor belt. But anyway, with all that for about $25, I had a very nice machine. So when we are going to take off that top gear, then there's no room to lift the gear up, which I'll explain in a little bit. So what you've got to do is pull this shaft down. What keeps this shaft up is the gear has a set screw to the shaft, and that's what keeps this shaft in place. So when you loosen that set screw to remove the gear, you don't really lift the gear, you pull down the vertical shaft about 1 inch or so, then you can take the gear out sideways. So to do that, you're going to want to go ahead and take off the timing belt. And yes, that means we have to retime the machine when we replace the gear and put it back together. And I will be showing you how to do that in this video. To remove this belt, there's just one screw here on the belt adjustment pulley, and we're gonna take that screw out and remove the whole pulley, adjusting pulley. Okay, and I'll show you those parts. So we've got the screw that holds the whole thing to the machine. Then we have these two round metal end plates that hold the eccentric part in the middle, and you see that the hole in these is in the center, right? See the hole in there? But the hole in the adjusting eccentric is way over by the side. And that's because when you assemble it, you got the screw in there, then you turn this up and down to adjust the tension of the belt. So this has like a nylon thing for the belt to slide over, and then the center part is metal. Okay, now we've got the belt adjusting pulley off. So we have some slack in the belt, and what we're going to do is lift the belt up and get it on the edge of this pulley, and then turn the pulley and the belt will slip off. So let me check my camera and make sure I got. So you lift this belt up and you right it up on the edge. Pull it towards you a little bit and get it up on the edge of the pulley. Let's see, this way. There. Can you see it's up on the edge of the pulley right there? So this end is still on the pulley as normal. Now it's coming off the pulley, and you just gently keep turning it to the right, and it's going to slip right off of that pulley. There you go. Later, when we go to put it back on, we kind of do it the same way. We get that top part on there, and we'll start turning the pulley, and then the bottom part will slip on and it'll be back on the pulley. Okay, so but for now we're going to lift the edge towards us, lift the belt over the edge, turn it, and it's off. Ta-da! Okay, so we've got all of our covers off, And we've got the belt off so that we'll be able to pull this down a little bit so we can get the gear out of the top end, right? Okay, so we're going to stand this back up, and we've got to work from the top now. Because we have to go in here and get a screwdriver. In this case, the set screw is a slotted one for a screwdriver. You may have an Allen wrench type. Like, see the new one I noticed came with a Allen wrench type instead of a screwdriver. So you may have that on the machine now. The original old ones all took a screwdriver type set screw. But I want to show you a picture I took before of looking through this slot and into the machine so you can see the gear setting on a shelf at the top of this vertical shaft. And I have the gear turned manually so that I can see that set screw, right? Because if your gear's broken and ruined, turning the hand wheel isn't going to move that gear. It's not going to move it around to where you can see it. So you can either turn it with your fingers from the top, or you can tilt the machine and you can turn that pulley left or right to get to where you can see that gear. But of course you're going to have to see the gear from this angle right here. So let me show you this slide of looking through here and what the gear now looks like. And there is a gear in here, okay, and it's a newer black one somebody had replaced. So let me show you that slide. Okay, so now you have the idea of what you need to see when you go to put your screwdriver or Allen wrench through this little access to get to the set screw on that gear. Now, I showed you this. This is the new gear. Okay, in this case it was a hex or Allen wrench. Now, you may find the existing gear all chewed up, but you might also find that the plastic part of it, the teeth, they're just totally gone. It's broken off and gone, like my experience. But the metal base of the gear that fits onto that shaft and attaches with the set screw, it'll still be there. Okay, even if the plastic part is totally gone. All right, so once you and you can put a bright light up here to help you see that, or put a flashlight to help you see that set screw. But let's see, I think I got this still lined up here. Then you've got to go in through the access port and you've got to loosen it a turn or two there we go, to get it loose enough to pull off the shaft. There. Okay, now if you like, you can work on the machine by laying it on its back like this, and you can turn it kind of like upside down to you, so you can go in here and whoops, can we still see that? So you can work on it this way, standing over the machine and going in like this if you want. Okay, it's up to you. Whatever's going to work easiest for you. But once you get it loosened, you have to lower the shaft to get it off of the shaft, because the gear is so close to the horizontal arm shaft here that's running through here, you can't lift the gear up and off of the shaft. There's just not enough clearance. So what you can do at this point is either tilt up the machine, and if your shaft is not all stuck and frozen, it'll slip down. There we go. Mine's slipped down. Let me tilt it more, and maybe you can see it here. You know, it'll tilt down like that, but it's got to be flush with the bearing. So a lot of times what I will do is prop it up on my board. Once I have that loose, I'll try and hold on to that gear with my finger, which I didn't do now, and the gear is falling way down in there. I'm going to have a heck of a time getting that out. But once you grab a hold of it and you've got the loose, if you lift up the machine like this and prop something under the side, you can pull the shaft down enough that it is below the top of the bearing, and you can now get your shaft out. So let me get my shaft out of there that I dropped down in the middle of nowhere land. And get it back up on the top of that bearing so I can show you how I get the gear out of that tight spot. You can develop your own method for this, of course, and most instructions will tell you loosen the set screw, lower the shaft a little bit, and remove the gear. So I'll show you how I do it, but let me get the gear back in position first. Okay, that wasn't a lot of fun digging that gear out of there. So this is a good reminder to me to tell you, do your best not to drop the gear down inside. Turning the machine on its back and upside down, I could hear the old gear rattling around in there. And I could see it, and I could even get my magnet stick on it. But I couldn't manipulate it back up through the forked feed connection and so forth. So I ended up taking the end cover plate that covers the motor and the motor belt, took that off and tilted the machine back this way, and then I could get a hold of it with my needle nose plier and pull the old gear out. So even if you do drop it down in there, it's not the end of the world, okay? But what I was trying to express to you was, once you get the set screw loose, you need to lower that motor shaft. To be able to slide the gear off of it. So it's kind of like the gear is going to be sitting on the motor shaft in there like that. It's going to be flush. And there's not enough room to lift it up and off because that horizontal arm is in the way. So you actually need to lower the shaft down into the bearing below the bottom of the gear. You need to lower the shaft. So what I showed you was lifting up the machine and propping the towel, or in this case my 2x4, under the end, and reaching under the machine and pulling down the shaft. Sometimes it'll just drop, but it's such a fine tight fit through the bearings you might have to wiggle it. But what I did not do when I showed you that was hold on to the old gear at the top. And that's what you want to do, because once you have the shaft lowered, you're going to stick your finger in through that access port, and you're going to kind of push the gear over onto your finger here. Sometimes you can reach in and grab it with a plier if you have a long needle nose. Go ahead and go through that. See if I can get up there. And remember, this is just me. This is just kind of how I found a way to get the gear out. Right? Get my finger through there. The gear is still stuck on the top of that shaft, right? So I'm going to try and lift this up, put the machine up on my 2x4. Oh, I see the shaft already dropped. Okay, I'm going to stick a finger through the top, or maybe my screwdriver will fit in there, and nudge that old gear over towards the port where I can get this finger on it to kind of guide it into that port opening more. Okay, I've got it over by the port opening now. Let's see. Maybe you can see the base of the gear right there. So, see if I can stick a finger from the top and one through there. Maybe I can bring the gear up. That's what I'll try and do. Yeah. I'll push it up with this finger through the port and hold it up a little bit higher so I can grab it with my needle nose. There. Whee! That was fun, huh? Now, like I showed you, so this gear is okay. Somebody had already replaced the original gear with this black gear, and it doesn't show any damage. But since I'm making the video and stuff, I'm going to take that out and I'm going to replace it with this gear, which, like I said, for some reason I prefer the white, but I guess it's because I've changed a few broken black ones, but I've never changed a broken white one. So I guess that's why I'm thinking maybe the white is stronger than the black, but I don't know that for a fact. That's just a hunch, kind of. Okay, now most of the guides will tell you don't take this shaft out, but I'm going to take the vertical shaft out because I want you to see it, and I want you to see the flat spot on the end of it and explain about that whole deal. See, nice tight fit. This would be, you know, give you an opportunity to clean it too and oil it. So you see that the top of the shaft, where that gear was sitting up there, like that, right? And then at the bottom is a pulley. And down here in the bottom of the machine, there's a nice bushing or bearing where this sits up against. And it's the same thing up inside the machine at the top. There's a bushing or bearing that this goes through, and then the bottom or base of your top gear sits on it, like that. And that's how power gets down to the below, and then your belt on the pulley goes over to the pulley on the hook, which spins the hook. Now, what I wanted to show you here When you have something like this with one set screw, it's usually because there's a flat spot on the shaft or bar that it attaches to. If you have two set screws on the gear, it's usually because there is no flat spot. So you have two gears kind of like at, I don't know, 60-degree angles maybe. So it's pinching the shaft between the two set screws. But on this top gear situation, every one I've ever done has one set screw and it goes on a flat spot. And I'm going to try and show you this flat spot. I think you can see where the set screw was pushing. You see the like a little brown spot there, and you can see that the shaft is flat right here. So that set screw, when it sits on there, has to go on that flat spot, just like that. And that's where it has to tighten, because if it's not on the flat spot and you tighten it, it can slip, right? So you have to tighten the gear on the flat spot, period. Done. And the top of the gear is going to be flush with the top of the shaft. Okay? But when this is all in the machine and you're trying to see down in here, you can look through the access port, right? And you can say, okay, there's my set screw. But how do you see where the flat spot is? It's like, wait, I got to get that screw on the flat spot. And you can turn the pulley, you can hold the gear, and you can turn the pulley and rotate that shaft around to try and find the flat spot. But what they did for you was right up at the tip of that shaft, they made a little flat spot at the very end. Right there. And of course, it's in line with the flat spot where you're going to put the set screw. It's right up here on the end of the shaft. So when you're looking down into it, you're going to see that flat spot. And I'm really hoping you can see it. Right now, let me point this down a little bit. Let me rest this someplace so it'll be... Here, wait a minute. There. Now my flat spot is right here on the bottom. Can you see that? It's all around, but on one portion, you'd be looking from the top down, you can see this little flat spot from above. Then you look in the port and you get your set screw turned to match up with the flat spot on the top. Okay? So you would rotate the pulley to rotate the shaft, and you would line up that little flat spot on the end where you can see it in the port on the front of the machine. Then you can gently turn the gear with your fingertips and line it up on that same flat spot. Then we push this up against the bushing, and we let the gear rest on the bushing above, and we tighten the set screw. That's the maneuver we're going to do. Now some people like to have the machine laid down to do this, you know, because then they can turn the pulley, and they can turn the gear with the other hand and kind of line everything up. My problem is getting the gear in place and held in the right spot when the machine is laying on its back. Yeah. So usually what I do is I put the shaft back in here, and then I stand the machine up, okay, and even though this is going to come down a little bit and rest on my bench top, it's still going to stick up enough through the bushing for me to see. Am I going to be able to show you that? Let's try it here. Not the best shot of it. Let me get my screwdriver in there. You see that? Oh, it's not too bad. You see the shaft sticking up through the bushing. So it's just to the left of the gear on the horizontal shaft, and it's down below the main horizontal shaft. And that right there is where you have to set the gear, and then push that shaft up into the hole on the new gear. So let me get a shot of how this looks. Let me get a nice shot, a still shot, show you a slide of how that looks when you're ready to put the new gear in the machine. All right. I hope that picture gives you a better idea of how that bushing looks down in there with the shaft up in the top bushing. Now, what I do is I have the base of the machine propped up on an old oil rag here so that I'll be able to lift it and get my hands on that pulley. I put the pulley up through the bushings and into the top bushing, and I've turned it as best as I could so the flat spot is facing my access port here. And first let me say that I prefer to have the set screw that uses a screwdriver and not the Allen wrench. So I have found that all these set screws are the same size, so I take the Allen wrench set screw out of the new gear, if that's what's in there, and I took the set screw that uses a screwdriver out of the old gear, and I'm going to use it on the new gear because I just prefer to reach in there with a screwdriver to tighten that. Now this usually fits. Maybe I should have tested it before I told you I'm going to do that. Usually it's the same threading. There we go. Now I want to tighten that set screw, but I don't want it sticking into the hole. So I'll just kind of get it close to the hole. If you have it sticking into the hole, of course you won't be able to get put it down on the shaft, you know. And I'll explain what I'm going to do. I'm going to try and show you as best I can. But basically I'm going to get the gear in the machine from the top, and I'm going to put my index finger in there And my idea is to set this on my finger to hold it inside. Then I'm going to take just like a wood stick like this, and I'm going to use it to maneuver this, to maneuver the new gear over onto the top of the bushing. Now if you have any part of the shaft is sticking up out of the bushing, you're not going to be able to get this to fit under the horizontal arm and on top of the bushing. So the top of that shaft has to be below the top of the bushing. And you have to line up this hole in the gear with the hole in the bushing. And it's a very tight tolerance. I mean, it's got to be exact. So when I maneuver this gear over to the bushing, you know what's in the way is the gear that it mates up with. So if you just push it up against the other gear, the hole may not line up with the bushing. So you've actually usually have to turn the hand wheel and wiggle it a little bit to get the gear to mesh. Once the gear is meshed, then the hole in the gear should be lined up with the hole in the bushing. When that takes place, I'm going to reach under the machine and get that pulley and push it up so the shaft comes up into this. Once I've got that, I don't need to hold the bushing anymore because it's already on the gear, because it's already going to be on the shaft and it's already going to be meshed with the matching gear. Then I'm going to fold up this oilcloth and put it right under the pulley and set the whole machine down on that oilcloth so that the pulley is pushed up against the bottom bushing. When that's the case, the shaft will be right up around the top of the gear here. And that's what you want. You want the bottom bushing, the bottom pulley right up against the bushing so you don't have play, and then this just setting on the bushing, and then you tighten it. Now you may have to turn the hand wheel to line up that set screw to where you can see it. But you don't want to push down on the gear and up on the pulley real hard when you tighten it, because you'll have binding. It won't turn easy. But you don't want that pulley not pushed against the bushing, because then you'll have play in the gear and play in the shaft. Okay, and I'll show you how to test for that. But that's basically what I'm going to try and do on camera here. See if I can, I don't know the best angle for this. Maybe like this. Okay. I'm going to check. I'm going to just lift up the machine here and turn that pulley just a little bit more so I can try and get the flat spot lined up where I want it. Alright, so I'm going to put this finger in to catch the gear. I'm going to try and drop it in the top right onto my finger. Hold it there. Whoop, whoop, whoop. Then I'm going to take this wood stick and put it in the hole of the gear. And now I'm going to try and maneuver that gear over on top of the bushing. I've got the edge of it on the bushing. I've got it sitting on the bushing, but it's not quite meshed. Okay, it's not quite meshed with the other gear. That went actually pretty good. Now I'm going to look down in here and I'm going to turn this hand wheel and wiggle it around, and I'm going to move the stick and move that gear. So as best as I can tell, the hole in the gear is sitting above the hole in the bushing. I think I'm pretty good there. Pretty close. So now I'm going to reach under the machine here, tilt it back, get my hand on that pulley, and try and move that shaft that's on the pulley, move it up into the gear. I may have to wiggle the, whoops, I just lost my lineup with the gear mesh. I may have to wiggle the gear around and try and maneuver it. I may have to not use the stick and try and get my fingers in there. But we're going to see. First I'm going to try it. See, I got to get this gear meshed back up there again. And if you get your fingers in there, you know, and you don't need the stick, or you have a screwdriver, or if you have a long skinny pair of needle nose pliers, whatever works for you. Okay, so I'm going to tilt the machine back, get my fingers under the pulley. I'm trying to push the pulley up and it's not going. Whoops, it just went up. Hear it? But my gear slid off the bushing. So I didn't have it lined up very well. I'm going to try and hold it with my fingers. This feels more precarious to me. So the gear had almost slid off the back of the bushing, and I almost lost it with my fingertips. So I used the stick to kind of push it back towards me, and I got my fingers on it. And I got my finger and thumb on the top of the gear this time. And I pushed it over towards the gear and towards the hand wheel. And when I couldn't push it anymore, I wiggled the hand wheel, and sure enough, I got a complete mesh on the gear. Once I did that, I started pushing up on the pulley underneath and just barely wiggled the gear, and then the shaft went right up into the gear. So I'm holding the pushing on the pulley now and holding the shaft up. And what I want to do is I'm going to take this folded cloth and stick it right under the pulley. Take my wood away, because I want that pulley to be pushed on and pushed all the way up to the bushing by setting it there. Setting it on the rag. Whew. Okay. Now I also, during this maneuvering, when I had my thumb and finger holding the gear, I could look in this little kind of window here for the left, center, right, and I could see the bottom of my gear as it sat on the top of the bushing. So that kind of helped me. What I've got right now is that pulley is pushed up against the bushing. Okay? And I need to go into the top and look at that shaft to make sure the flat spot is turned towards me. And then I need to turn the hand wheel now to turn the gear, which is easily done now. It's not going to fall off now that I have the shaft up in there. And then turn that gear towards me so that the set screw is here, and I feel the set screw is on the flat spot of that shaft. And when I get all that accomplished, then I can tighten the set screw. I think my shaft turned just a little bit when I put that oil rag in there. So I'm lifting the machine up, putting my fingertip on the pulley, and turning it a little bit to line it up more. And I think I've got that now. What I want to try and do is stop filming. I'm going to take a picture down in there to show you the new gear sitting on the shaft, meshed with the other gear, and ready for the set screw to be tightened. Okay, so hang on. Okay, that gives you an idea now of what you'll see in there. And got the flat spot lined up so that I can go in here with my screwdriver, the flat spot of the shaft. I've rotated the hand wheel so that the set screw is lined up with the flat spot, and I can get my screwdriver on the set screw. And I have my folded up rag holding that pulley up against the bushing. So if you lay this machine on its back to do what I've done, you know, get the gear on there and adjust the pulley and everything, just remember the pulley has to be up flush to the bushing. You don't want any space between the back of the pulley and the bushing. And then up here I just have the gear resting on the bushing with the shaft inside. You don't need to push both the gear and the pulley together. That would be too much pressure when you tighten the set screw, and it's just going to make that shaft and the gear and pulley bind and restrict movement. So once I have that all done, all I've got to do now is go in here with my screwdriver and get it in the set screw, and then tighten it up good. And you want it to be very snug. You know, there's no need to over tighten it and risk cracking the screw or anything, but you want it very firm so that it doesn't work loose. Okay. As a matter of fact, I'm going to take whoops. So I'm going to take one more picture of that there with the screwdriver in there. Alright, now I can tilt this back now, and I can take out my folded rag that was holding up the pulley. And what I'm going to do is grab that pulley and push and pull on it and make sure I don't have movement, that I don't have play. Yeah, and I don't. It's tight. Okay, and then I'm going to come up and I'm going to test by turning my hand wheel. Let me see, maybe I can give you a shot of that. I know it's very hard to see the gear down below here, but you might be able to barely see it, but I can see it. I turn the hand wheel, and the gear is turning smoothly with it. No problem. So it's a nice mesh, not going to damage the teeth, and it turns smoothly. And when I push and pull on that pulley down here, I don't have any play. Okay. So we've got the old gear out, and we've got the new gear in place, and that's most of the battle. But what we've got to do now, of course, is we have to put the timing belt back on those two pulleys, and then we have to retime the needle point to the hook point, because we've messed that all up. You know, once we've taken this off and put it back on, the timing will be lost. So in the next section here, I'm going to show you how to reset the timing on the machine. Hey, hold on a second before we go to that timing. I realized that I didn't show you this part. You're going to want to test your installation and everything like that. The only thing I mentioned was if you turn this over and if you grab the pulley, you know, you don't want it wiggling up and down. You don't want there to be play in there. But also you're going to run the motor and turn it by hand, which I did, and it's smooth, so I was done. But since you've been working on this, and you may have pulled the shaft completely out like I did, you know, to clean it or just to look at it, but you have to re-oil those bearings, okay? And the way that you oil the top bearing is right through this port in the front. That's exactly what this port is. And if you have, this is my tri-flow that I use, and it comes with a straw or a tube, and you want, if you have that, you want to stick it in as far as it'll go, and I'll show you how far it goes. You know, it's like a couple of inches to get in to that bearing, and then you want to put this time a few drops of oil in there. Okay. Now, if you don't have an oil bottle with a straw or a tube, you definitely want to lay the machine on its back and put a few drops of oil this way so that it will penetrate down into the bearing, which is a couple of inches from this hole. Alright, now you can't really oil the inside of the bearing from up here, and I think that's where people get in trouble, is they see in the manual grease and a little arrow, and they're talking about the worm gear on the horizontal arm, but people put grease on these plastic gears, and I think that's what ruined the old gear. And people try and put oil on that bushing from the top, and of course you can't, but oil gets on the gear, which is even worse than the grease. So it's the same thing with the bottom. They try and put oil behind the pulley, but this port on the right side of the work bed, right here at the bottom of the upright, look, that's lined up with that shaft, and this port goes right into the lower bushing where the pulley is. So you would stick your straw in there. I'll show you how far this is. Not quite as far. Okay, because you notice it's not, the port isn't out, whoops, the port isn't out here on the front of the upright, it's on the side. So it's just going down at an angle to that bushing. So put your straw in there and put a few drops of oil for the bottom of the bushing. And then you want to turn the hand wheel and let that work, work in there. And then we'll run it. I got it plugged in here, and we'll run it, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so always turn the hand wheel by hand first after you replace that, because if for some reason it's not fully meshed and you give it a blast with the foot pedal and the motor, you could damage the new gear. So always lubricate the bearings, and then turn the hand wheel by hand and make sure you have a nice smooth operation. Then you can test it with your foot pedal slowly, just make sure that it looks good there, sounds good. Alright, now we'll move on. Now we'll move on to putting on the timing belt and retiming this machine. To begin the process of retiming the machine after I've replaced the top gear, I put the faceplate back on temporarily because I need to have certain settings, and without the faceplate they won't stay in position. So I only use the 3 small screws here to get the plate back on. And I say temporarily because later I'm going to strip down the machine and wash it when I do my restoration. But with this plate back on, you want the needle position to be in the center, and you want the stitch width to be locked all the way over at 0. But that's the proper setting when we go to time the hook to the needle. We want the needle center. Okay, then I just lay the machine on its back like that so I can get the belt back on here, and I'm going to prop it up on my wood block so that you can see it a little bit better. And the first thing before I put the belt on, part of timing the hook is that you have to loosen the set screws on the pulley for the hook shaft here. So I'm going to go ahead and do that before I slip the belt back on, because I just find it easier to do. If you're just watching this to time your machine, you don't have to have the belt off. You want your belt all reassembled, and you can loosen these 2 set screws with the belt on, of course. Before I loosen these 2 set screws, I want to show you, you've heard me talk about play, like over here when I tried to push this pulley and shaft up and down to check for play. Well, I noticed that the hook shaft does have play. So you're not going to be able to see how much it moves, but you should be able to hear it. So it's moving, I don't know, a 32nd of an inch, not much, but you do not want play like that. So we'll fix that after we put the belt back on and after we're done with the timing. But you need this pulley to be loose on the shaft, because when you get your needle in the correct position, you have to go up on the hook and rotate the shaft, rotate the hook to line it up with the needle. So you want this loose, because if you manually turn the hook up in the bobbin area, you don't want this pulley moving, because it will move this pulley and that will change the needle position. So that's the reason when timing a belted machine, you need to loosen this pulley. Now most of these have 2 set screws, and they take an Allen wrench. And they have 2 set screws because there's usually no flat spot on the hook shaft, like there was on this vertical shaft over here for the gear. So I'm just going to go in and find these. These can be on very tight. A lot of people over tighten them because they don't want the pulley to get loose on the shaft. But there's 2 here. There's 1 here and 1 here. So I don't know. I don't know if that's quite a 90-degree angle or 100 or 80. But you should see 2 of these set screws on this type of singer, and get a good fitting get a good fitting Allen wrench, because like I said, they can be very, very tight. Once I get this loosened, I'm going to take it off and just show you the pulley and stuff. There we go. You don't need to remove the set screws. There is an indented area on the shaft, so I've removed them enough already to get past that. Usually about a full turn loosening will do it. So here is the pulley. You see, it's just a smaller version of this pulley, but when we install it on the shaft, we do it with the set screws turned out, not in, because if we installed it this way, it would be a lot more difficult to loosen those set screws to do the timing. So don't make that mistake like I did the first time and put it on that way. You don't really have to pull this off unless you want to. I'll be doing that later because there's a lot of bits of worn belt in the inside, though, in the cog area there, and I scrubbed that out and so forth. But you don't need to pull it off to do any timing. Okay, so with that loosened up ahead of time, I'm going to go ahead and slip my belt back on. I can find what I did with my belt, and I'm going to put it on the little pulley and just slip it over the top edge of the big pulley and gently rotate that so that the pulley belt slips onto the pulley like that. Okay. Now I want to reinstall the tensioning pulley, if you remember that. It's got the 4 parts plus the screw. I'll get that out here. So it has the eccentric steel center with the nylon collar for the belt to ride on, and then it has the 2 metal end pieces that keep those 2 parts together. And then it can go either way. You know, it doesn't matter, but you have to slip it up under the belt, and get it in position to put the screw in, because you need the belt to ride on that nylon collar. I think I missed this last. There we go. I'll assemble it like that and then slip it under the belt. How's that? Now there's some discussion always about the tension of this belt, and I tend to go with about, I guess, a 1/2 inch of flex. You don't want this belt tight because it just binds everything and fights the motor on your machine. But you don't want it too loose, of course, because it can slip even though it's cogged. And I've had people that have brought me their machines and the belt has been so loose it just flapped around, got caught on the pulley and fell off. So the way you set tension is by turning that eccentric in the center. You know, so if you turn the eccentric so the high side is up, you can see it puts more tension on the belt. If you turn the high side of the eccentric down, it puts less tension. Like, see, to me that's way too loose. If I turn it up all the way, I have to hold it there, but it's way too tight. So I want a little bit of flex there. Let me get my screwdriver ready, because you will turn it until you find the tension that you're comfortable with, and then tighten the screw at that point. So I'll get it almost ready to tighten, and then I will turn the eccentric up a little bit. I think that'll do it. The thing is, it's very easy to adjust the tension now that you see how that works, right? So if you change your belt or reset the timing, leave the oil pan off and run the machine, see how it seems to you. If it seems that this is flapping around too much, then loosen the screw and move the eccentric up and make a little more tension. If it seems very tight and you feel like the motor is straining or the machine doesn't run as fast as it used to, then loosen this and turn the eccentric down to let a little more slack come in. So I don't know, I usually stick a finger under that, and it's like, yeah, okay, that looks about right. I guess it'd be about a 1/2 inch of flex. But remember, every belt's different, every machine is different, and it's very easy to adjust tension without changing the timing. So you can adjust tension whenever needed. If you put a new belt on there a few months or a year later, it might stretch a little bit and you might have to tighten the tension up a little bit. Okay, so we've got this belt back on and our tension set where we like it. So I'm going to stand up the machine here, and we're going to work up on the top side for a while. Now, for sure, you're going to want to remove any presser foot, because you're going to have to see the needle down in there in the hook area. So, in my opinion, definitely you want to remove the presser foot. And I go ahead and take out the screw. And you should remove your bobbin case also, because it's very hard to see the hook point and needle when you're setting the timing if this bobbin case is in place. Okay, let's see if I can get a little closer. I'll show you how to do this in case you've never done this before. This particular one is very similar to the several Singer machines that have a front drop-in bobbin with a horizontal hook. There's this bracket and spring over here called the bobbin case positioning bracket, and the little pointy spring finger here, bobbin case positioning spring. And there's a edge right next to this big adjustment screw here, and you can just put your finger or a small screwdriver under there, and you want to lift up this bracket a little bit and swing it to the right. It doesn't lift high and it doesn't swing far, just enough to get the positioning spring away from holding the bobbin case. So we lift it up off of that adjusting screw, and then we swing it to the right. So I don't know what it move, 1/4 inch, not 1/8 of an inch. But look, now this is loose, and that's what we want. So I like to rotate the hand wheel because you don't have to take off the feed dog to do this. You can usually see down between the toes of the feed dog and see the needle and stuff like that. But you would like the dog up at the highest position so you can maneuver this off. And basically you're going to swing the end close to you over to the right a little bit to get it off of the race. On this round hook there's a small shelf that's called the race, and that's what the bobbin case sits on as the hook races around, and that's what we have to get it off of. So I'm just going to push the back end over a little bit, and you see it's already coming off that race, right? See how loose it is now? Then you pick up this end and then pull it towards you. There's like this little fork or prongs up here that go on a positioning post. And this is, you see that groove right there? That's what sits on the race, that little shelf. Okay, and look, I can turn my hook now because I have that pulley loose, right? That's what you have to do. Okay, so let me show you how to put this back on. You can take this off once in a while because lint and dirt get stuck in this groove and it can make the case jump and not sit right if it gets full of dirt and lint. So it's easy to take off when you clean your area, brush it, vacuum, you know, use Q-tips, whatever. You can scrape this out and wash this out too. But to put it in, it's just kind of the opposite. We're going to put the end of it a little bit to the right, and then we're going to put this toes or prongs in first on the rectangular position post, and then we're going to move it over to the left onto that shelf. Okay, and the hook can be in any position because the race or the shelf goes all the way around the hook. Okay, it does help if your feed dog is up though. So I'm just going to put the front end of it kind of down against that post, and then I want to, when it's on there, I want to lower the back end. This end, that's the back, I guess. Lower the front end and then move it left onto the race. So I can try and lift it up now and it won't go because the race is in that slot, or the slot's on the race. And the front end won't lift up here. Once you have it in place, you just lift this bracket back up and swing it left and drop it back over the adjusting screw. That puts the bracket in position, and it puts the spring, bobbin case positioning spring, right against it. So you see there's a little tiny movement now, but it's tight. So that's how you put it back. So of course we're gonna take it out. So we lift and push to the right, swing this end to the right and lift it up and out. Now I like to go ahead and put this bracket back down because I don't want it damaged while I'm flipping the machine around. And these two things you do not need to do, but I'm going to take off the cover plate, and I am going to remove the feed dog because I hope to be able to film closer or take pictures of the needle point to the hook point later. But you probably don't have to do this. But if you want to rotate your hand wheel so the feed dog is at the lower position, and then just start pushing your slide plate forward. Now usually right there it hits your needle plate, right? But you have the needle plate off, so if you just lift this back end a tiny bit up here, you can push this right up over the feed dog, and you'll push it off the retaining spring that's under here. See? Here we go. There. So there's our feed plate. Our slide plate. Feed plate. There's our slide plate. Okay. And here's the retaining spring. And that just, let me get a little screwdriver here. The way that works is that when it's on the spring and you slide it, these ends up here are closed. There's a slot for the spring to slide on the spring, but this end is kind of crimped or closed on both sides, so that when you open it, it stops. It doesn't just fall off. Now to put it back on, the same thing. If your feed dogs are there, put them at the low spot. Lay your plate up here past the spring, and then start sliding it towards the spring. Get a small screwdriver or whatever, and just lift up that spring a tiny amount to get it started in that groove, that slot. See, this one is in, and this one isn't. You can see it's at a slant here. Once the one side is in, put a little pressure on the plate forward to keep it from falling off. Lift the other edge of the spring. Now push it into the slot, and then the spring is in the slot on both sides, and your plate is back on. Very easy. Okay, so I'm going to take that off so that we have a better view. And let me turn the machine around, and I am going to take the feed dogs off as I mentioned, so that we can see in here a little better. Okay, I'm going to work from the back side of the machine here. Maybe I can film it that way. I have my little offset ratchet on, oops, I want to remove. That's tighten. That's remove. On my Chapman screwdriver set. Okay. I like this because it can be hard to get a screwdriver down past the body and onto this. It's not impossible, but it's a little bit harder, and I have replaced a lot of damaged feed dog screws. In this case there's two of them. So I take a little edge of a small screwdriver to kind of, you can do a knife to, or a pin or an old needle, and kind of scrape out the slot because it can get impacted with oil and lint and other stuff, because you want your screw driver tip to fit in there very completely, and you want to use the right size you know, for the screws that you find in there, because they can be in there real tight. And that's the other reason I like using this little ratchet, because I can get directly over, I can get my screw tip right straight down in and push it down while I turn the ratchet to loosen it. That one is loose. Let me come to the other side. Now, usually better if you have your presser bar up, it gives you just a little bit more room. See how I can maneuver this in here and keep it in the picture. Tight fit, told ya. So I know right now that a lot of you are saying, well, I'm not going to take the feed dog out. I'm having trouble on this model getting around the presser bar and to get the screwdriver in there. Ooh, tight fit. Let's try it. Okay. There we go. Once I got them loose, now I can take a different screwdriver and remove them and not worry so much about damaging them. Usually loosening them and the final tightening is when people strip the head or damage it. They're not big screws. When you think of what the feed dog does, you know, pulls your material on every stroke, and the feed dog is a heavy metal. But the screws, they kind of surprise me because they're never very big. I don't know, can you see that? They're just little guys. And to me, the metal is kind of soft. So like I said, I've replaced a lot of damaged feed dog screws. Now that I got both screws loose, I can just pull that right out. Okay. And I'll be ultrasonically cleaning all this stuff later. But now you see the feed lift bar that's there with the two holes, you know. Whoops, I better put these in my magnetic tray so I don't lose those. But now I have this area open to work with. Okay, so the next part of this, I have to set the needle onto the hook timing mark and get it in position, and then I've got to rotate the hook point to get it directly behind that needle when the needle's at the right height, and I've got to hold everything in place while I tighten those set screws. So that's what I'll be doing next. Okay, I'm set up here to show you now the actual setting the timing function. In setting the timing, I've installed my number 18 needle. Most of the service manuals recommend you use a size 18 needle. If you don't have that, just use a 16 or a 14. I try and use at least a number 14 on these vintage machines. But install your needle, be sure that it's all the way up into the needle clamp it securely. And now there's going to be two timing marks on the needle bar. And right now they're way up here. There's just two round marks, bands, and they look kind of black usually because they've got a little bit of oil or grit in them. You should be able to see them clearly on a machine like this. Now you want to rotate the hand wheel towards the front of the machine, which would be turning the hand wheel counterclockwise, and bring the needle bar and the needle down to its lowest point. So I'm going to turn it. It's going down, 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 and that's it. I'm going to settle it right on the lowest point. With the needle bar in that position, you should easily see the lower timing mark, which is actually for timing the hook. And if you get down and look very closely up here, right at the bottom of this bushing, you should see the top band or timing mark just about to enter into the bushing. Singer calls it parallel with the bottom of the bushing. That's the mark you use to set your needle bar height. So when the needle bar is at its lowest point, by turning the hand wheel, the top mark should be just barely below the bushing. Now on this machine, if it's not, you just loosen this set screw, this clamping screw right there, and then you can move the needle bar up and or down a little bit so that the top mark is right at the bottom of the bushing, and then retighten the clamping screw. And of course you want your needle positioned properly, the needle bar and the needle clamp and everything. But that is needle bar height. Now to set the timing and use the lower mark, you just keep rotating the hand wheel towards the front of the machine. It's important that you use these timing marks when you rotate the hand wheel towards the front of the machine or turning the hand wheel counterclockwise. The space between the two bars is, the two timing marks is, I don't know, a 1/16 of an inch or 3/32 maybe. So you just rotate the hand wheel a little bit more until the bottom mark gets up just about to enter into the bottom of the bushing. So you should still be able to see that bottom timing mark if you get down here and look. If you can't see it, it's gone too far, your needle's too high. Okay. When you have the needle bar set on that bottom timing mark, this is when your hook point should be right behind the needle. Okay. And in this case, it's not. I see the hook point is way back over here. Let's see if I can lift this up a little and then point the camera down a little. So my hook point is back there, and here's my needle right up here. Okay. Now that's why we have the set screws off of the pulley down below. So I can rotate this hook with my fingers without changing the height of the needle. When the set screws are tightened on that pulley and the belt's in place, all of this moves together. So if I was manually turning the hook, the needle bar would start to go up higher. I wonder if I can rotate it past there a little bit, and I think right here you can see the light reflecting on the hook point. So that's where the hook point is, and it should be right behind the needle now. So I'm going to just turn it back. See if I rotate my machine this way so I'm looking straight on it from the front. I don't want to see the hook point before the needle, and I don't want to see it sticking out past the needle. I want the very point of the needle, of the hook point, the point of the hook point hidden from my sight directly behind the needle. Now, if your height of the needle bar is correct, that point will also be about a 1/16 of an inch above the eye of the needle. But the most important is that the hook point is directly behind the needle. Now, the goal now is to tighten the pulley on the hook shaft down below without changing any of this, because you have the timing now set perfectly. So you want to re-establish the connection of the pulley to the hook point. Also, when you go down there to tighten that, you have to push on the hook down towards the pulley, and you have to push the pulley up to the bushing so that there's not that play I showed you before. Now, you don't want to smash them together and cause binding, cause them to be so tight together that they can't rotate in the bushing. But you definitely don't want that play that I showed you. Now, one problem that I've always had turning this back is that my needle bar will move. Somehow I bump the hand wheel, or I move the needle bar. So I'm going to try something new this time. I just have a tie strap. This is the first time I've ever tried this, but I just thought, for the heck of it, once I had the needle in the right position, I'd put one of these zip ties on there, nice and snug, with the idea that it would be harder for me to move the needle bar higher or lower now. And I'm just going to check here, make sure that I like the height. Whoops. That I like the height of the bar. I can just barely see that black lower timing mark, and that's good. Now I'm still seeing that my hook point is behind the needle. That's good. Now, to keep an eye on this and to be able to push, usually what I've done is I'll put something down for protection, and I'll lay the machine on the back side, and so I can look at it from the end. Okay, that way I can make sure my needle doesn't move, that it's at the right height, and that I can still see the timing mark there, and I can look down from above and make sure that my hook point is still behind the needle. I can put my finger on the center of that hook base and push down, and then I can also see my pulley to push it up. See, you don't want that play, so you're pushing down on the hook and you're pushing up on this, and you want to tighten one of the set screws. Okay, so without rotating the hook or anything like that, you just want to get to whatever set screw you can get to and tighten one of these up fairly snug. Don't tighten it like there's no tomorrow, and I'll explain why. Okay, So that's pretty good. It can be tightened further, but not at this time. Now I want to go back and I'll check here for play. Okay, I don't have any play because I just kind of pushed down at the hook from the top and pushed up on this and tightened it. I want to go back and take a nice close look at my timing mark here on the needle. Make sure it's in the right place, and it is. Then from above, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to look down at the needle point and see if the hook point is still behind it. So let me maneuver around this tripod a little bit. Oop, sorry. And get up off the stool and look down from above here. A little more light on there. It looks very nice. I think I've got it. So what I want to do now is cut this. I kind of liked using that. I felt I had a lot less chance of moving this, and it seemed to stay in place pretty good. So now I'm going to take it off and check my hook point again. Looks really good. Now when I turn the hand wheel, the hook point is going to move now. But I have to rotate the hand wheel so that I can rotate this pulley, because I have to find the other set screw. And I have to tighten it, right? Well, I may not have to rotate it. It's over here on this side. So I think I can get there. Now I'm going to snug it up, if I can, from this position. The reason I said not to tighten the first set screw super hard is because even though there's very tight clearances for the hook shaft and the hole in the pulley, there is a little bit of space. And if I found if I tighten the first set screw really hard, it actually pushes the pulley a little bit to the opposite side. Just a little, I mean a little. But if I just snug it up, check my height of the needle bar and hook point to needle point, and it all looks good, now I can come back and I'm going to tighten this side up more firm. Now I can come back to the first one and tighten at the last little bit of tightness, and I feel like I'm getting the pulley onto the shaft nice and evenly. I noticed when I took these set screws out, there were dents in the in the hook shaft that they had been tightened so hard. And of course, like I said, you don't want them slipping and stuff. But okay, let's get this one. Yeah, I think those are both plenty hard. So now when I turn the hand wheel, not only is the pulley going to turn, but because the pulley's tight on the hook shaft, now the whole hook is going to turn like it should. And I'll come back up here. Get a little light here, and you can see the hook. There's the hook point coming around right there. But see how it's turning now? Everything's working in conjunction. So as the needle bar comes down all the way, as far as it's going to go, and I see the top of the timing, 2 timing marks, but as I come back up just a little bit, now I see the hook coming around the side. I don't know if I open this up if you could see that hook a little bit better. I can see the point of that hook coming right behind the needle. Let's see if I can get one of these other clamp lights over here. If I was rich, I'd hire a lighting expert to help me out here. Okay, so needle coming down, right? Bottoming out, and on the way back up, here comes the hook point, and it's right behind the needle. The point of the hook is about 1/16 of an inch above the eye of the needle. And let me just check my timing mark for the last time. Oh, these metal machines are heavy, aren't they? Yep, I can just barely see my black timing mark. I don't think you'll be able to, but I can. So that's the process of timing the point of the hook to the point of the needle. Because the needle is going to be stationary when you're doing that. It's on the up stroke, meaning it's gone down. As it comes up, the thread is dragging on the fabric, so it forms a little tiny loop, and that hook has to come right by to snatch that loop and snag your needle thread, take it around the bobbin thread and cast it off to make your lock stitch. So let's see, if you want to test it, you'd have to thread your needle and put your needle plate back on and turn it by hand and go in and let the hook grab the needle thread and drag it around. Maybe I can do that for you. Let me set that up. Okay, so I decided to leave the needle plate off so you could see this action better, I hope. And I don't know if I can get it much closer and keep it in focus there. But you see the bright pink thread that I have, I've threaded the needle with. As the needle comes down, and it's going to bottom out, and then on the upstroke, here comes the hook, right? And it's going to grab that thread, and here it comes around. And then at about 6 o'clock position, it's going to cast it off. Then it would wrap around the bobbin thread to form the lock stitch. And then, oops. Do it again for the next stitch here. Your needle comes down on the upstroke. Here comes the hook, grabs the thread, takes it around, casts it off, etc. Whoops. So after you set the timing, you want to check it, and you can put your bobbin holder back in and your spool and put all of this all back together and thread your needle, and you can go down, and the first thing you want to see is if you can lift up your bobbin thread, because to do that you have to hook the needle thread and wrap it around the bobbin thread to lift it up. you know, and that's how you would test. So we've all finished. We've taken out the old gear at the top of the vertical shaft, and we've put in the new gear, and we've meshed the gear, and we've checked for play in the gear or play in that vertical shaft, you know, that we don't have a play in that. Then we put our belt back on and we loosened the pulley set screws. We came up here and we double checked our needle height and set it for the lower timing mark, and then rotated our hook behind the needle, kept it all there, went down, carefully tightened the pulley on the hook shaft down here, and we don't have any play. A little tiny bit of play is okay. I mean, you don't want it smashed together so hard that it can't, you know, it binds. We have a nice about 3/8 inch or 1/2 inch of flex in our timing belt. So I think we're in pretty good shape. And just let me give you a reminder here. I mentioned this back at the beginning of why I put this on. When you do the timing, you must have the needle set in the center position. So it can go left, center, right. You want it in the center. And you do not want it in any width zigzag position. You want it over on 0, on straight stitch, and that's how you time it. And if you get your needle height right and the timing mark right and the hook behind the needle, when you do zigzag and the needle is you know, swinging left to right and so forth, you won't have any problem. No matter how long the stitch or how wide the zigzag, your timing will work on both of those things if you set the timing at center and 0 width. Ta-da! What can you say about that? That has got to be one of my longest videos, but I tried to cover a few things there. And my videos are free, right? So, and you know, at the bottom of the YouTube screen on the right side, there's a little gear, and if you click that gear, you can speed up the video. So if I'm going too slow for you, you could run it up to, you could change that to 1.25, 1.5, I think up to double the speed. So I'm just going to put all this stuff back, but first I'm going to clean the whole machine. Thanks for tuning in. I now have this video, so weekly when I get emails about how to fix that gear, I can just refer people to my video now. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you learned something, and I hope you'll come back in the future to Andy Tube. Take care.